Hey everybody, it's Alex here with that age-old question. Do you struggle with mom guilt? Like seriously, who doesn't? Let me narrow it down. Do you struggle with mom guilt that is about not getting enough time, enough quality time being present for your kids because you just have too much to do and you can't get it all done? Do you struggle with that kind of mom guilt, the kind of mom guilt that tells you, I am not enough, I am not doing enough, I am not present enough? Well, today I'm going to tell you why you and just about every other mother on the planet struggles with mom guilt. I am going to tell you why you blame yourself. You blame yourself for not being enough. And I'm going to tell you why you don't need to blame yourself, why it actually isn't your fault for not getting it all done, for not being organized enough, for not being focused enough, for not being energetic enough, for not being playful enough, for not being efficient enough, for not being present enough. I'm going to tell you why none of that is your fault, and that it's actually, here's a spoiler alert, it's actually a bit of a systematic problem. It's actually not a bit of a systematic problem. It's a huge systematic problem. And I'm going to walk you through that. And I'm going to tell you what you need to know in order to throw the mom guilt out the fucking window. All right. So I'm going to start with a story. So for ages and ages and ages, I've got 3 kids. My oldest is 15. We adopted her when she was 2.5. So about 13 years ago, I became a mother. And from that very day, I felt a kind of guilt that I haven't felt for a really long, that I had never actually experienced before. So I used to get down on myself for not spending enough time with my kids, for having a messy house, for forgetting stuff, especially if it was for them, but of course, forgetting anything, I feel bad about that. For being late, which I was always late to go everywhere. For never being on top of my to-do list. For never being, organized enough, focused enough, efficient enough, fast enough, present enough, kind enough, patient enough. And I get down on myself for feeling, tired, and for feeling frustrated with them or with my life, or for feeling grumpy and short-tempered. And I would really hate myself when I would have one of those days when I was feeling all of those things, the grumpy, short-tempered, exhaustion, all of that. Hi, Melissa. Hey, love. I'd get really down on myself when I was feeling all of those things, and I would let it out on my partner or my kids. So I'd lose my cool, I'd yell at them, or I'd even feel guilty when I just wanted white space and time by myself, and I did not want, to hang out with them or to play with them. I would feel guilty. And I'm not going to say that the guilt has totally and completely gone away, but it has definitely calmed, and it does not dominate my life anymore. I remember nights when the kids were really little, and I would go to bed and I'd be like, oh my God, I major fuck up today, yelled at the kids, sorry I was such a bitch to you, honey, and I just need to get my act together, I need to get more organized, I definitely was not cut out for this motherhood thing, I gotta do some more work on this, I'm fucking the kids up. And he'd tell me, he would say, listen, you're being too hard on yourself. This is really, really hard. And I'd be like, oh, thanks, honey. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're so nice. Oh, aren't I so lucky to have a man like you? And, no matter how many times he would say this to me, because there was not just one night like this. There were many nights like this. No matter how many times he would say this to me, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that I was being too hard on myself. Even my mom used to say, you're such a great mom. I'm like, what are you talking about? I am like a fraction of the good mother that you were. And I believed this, that I was failing as a mother, that I was not enough. I wasn't able to get my act together. I was not enough in any senses of the word. I believed this for years. And having coached many stressed and overwhelmed mothers, like over the last almost 10 years now, I can tell you that I am not alone in this feeling, that this feeling, I mean, for those of you watching, like, send me a little heart if this resonates. If you also feel like you aren't good enough at what you do as a mother, as a house manager, as, as a partner, this feeling that you need to do more and be better, right? Like if that resonates for you, then give me a thumbs up or a heart or something. But what I want to share with you today is why it's all a big ass lie and why we should not be taking the blame for this and why mom guilt is working against us. So I opened my eyes to one sort of blow my mind away truth. And Melissa, I know that I have spoken to you about this and to other women who have worked with me. But this whole not enough-itis that mothers suffer from and the guilt that comes along with it is actually part of the system that we live in. And the system that we live in is, I mean, there are various systems layered on top of one another. We can call it, patriarchal capitalism or heteropatriarchal capitalism, but I'm going to focus on the patriarchal piece of the system that we live in. So there were 3 lessons or 3 sort of takeaways that I want you to have after you have finished watching this video. And the first one is, no big surprise, we live in a patriarchy. Okay. Even though some of us feel like we're liberated women out in the working world making money, or we're liberated because our partners support us at home, or for whatever reason, the systems, external, and I'm going to talk about how they've been internalized, are patriarchal ones. And the second point is that we've internalized the patriarchal messaging. And the third point is that this is the worst of everything, that our self-worth and our identities are linked to this messaging that we have internalized, and therefore changing that messaging actually means changing our relationship with ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about the patriarchy. And remember, what I'm going to talk, the reason I'm looking this way is because these are my notes and I just want to make sure that I don't forget anything. I spent a good amount of time putting it all down there, and I just want to make sure that I get this all communicated to you very clearly. I'm going to tell you why you and everybody else feels the way you do, why mom guilt is so prevalent for mothers all over the world, why not getting it done is not your fault, why not being able to get it all done and be present for your kids and be the good mom and the good partner and the good housekeeper and the good everything and not feeling like you're good enough is not your fault. I'm going to tell you that. And then I'm going to also tell you what we need to do to step away from this nasty sort of self-blame game that keeps us stressed and overwhelmed and down on ourselves, right? So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. And the first thing I want to talk to you about is the patriarchy. So I'm going to be looking a lot at my lessons here because a lot of what I'm talking about is based on books that I've read and research that I've done in this area. Now, I have to say, I'm a student and I am still learning. I am by no means an expert on the patriarchy and socioeconomic change in gender relations and all that stuff. I have studied development studies, but this whole kind of lens is new to me. Having said that, I have really great teachers in this area. So we live in a culture today that has only if you look at kind of the span of human existence, only very recently have our societies decided or accepted that women are equal to men. And we know that there are lots of pockets, some of them larger than others, and many of them more powerful than others in our societies that don't buy that. They don't buy that women deserve equal opportunity to men. So ours is a culture, and this is a quote, that has been built, ruled, and inherited from father to son, in heaven as on earth, okay? So this is the literal meaning of patriarchy, the rule of the father. It's a social system, and I think this is a Wikipedia definition. Yes, it is. It's a social system in which the primary power, predominant in roles of political leadership, moral authority, so the church, social privilege, and control of property, is in the domain of the family. Fathers or father figures hold authority over women and children. So the father figure is in charge of the family, okay, and has authority over members of that family. This is a definition that I drew from a book which I recommend to everybody called Burning Times by Lucy Pierce, Burning Woman by Lucy Pierce, and it is all about the burning of witches, and it's really a lot of feminists today are talking about how the burning of witches was a time that women were suppressed into their current roles in society through fear and through this kind of torture. And, tens of thousands. There are actually estimates that go up into the millions, but they're considered quite radical, and I don't know how scientifically based they are. But between tens and hundreds of thousands of women were actually burned, and sometimes for simple things like just gathering together or, speaking up against a male figure of authority. So what I want you to know, though, is that this type of social system didn't always exist as is, and it's really important for us to understand that, because the way, it's a social construct that influences us, and that has been influenced by the powers that be, that has been constructed by the powers that be. And I'm not going to go into the whole history, but I am going to talk a little bit about the evolution of patriarchy, because I think it will make sense to you if I do. So, I also want to sort of, when we understand how it came to be, then we can understand the assumptions that exist within it, right? So, what I understand, and I've only read, books here and there, and I'm not like I don't have a PhD in this or anything, but from what I understand is that there's a strong link between the rise of agriculture, which happened 12,000 years ago, private property, the rise of private property, economic inequality, and then the sort of rise of a class system, in conjunction with the emergence of Hebrew monotheism, so Judaism, and then Judeo-Christianism, okay, which was monotheistic. So where humans started to, we're talking about the Western world here, looked at like one God, and that God was male. So in different places and at different times and in different ways, and at different paces over the course of history, between like 12,000, years ago and 350 years ago, but one could argue that there are still executions of women, stoning of women, happening today. So people could, argue that this is still happening, but that, nation states and religious institutions that at a time were linked to these nation states were subordinating women, and we can think of like the witch trials, for instance, so that they behaved in a certain way, and that women's cooperation in a patriarchal system was secured by force sometimes, and also by economic systems that ensured their economic dependence. Okay. So economic dependence on the male head of the family. And this is really important. I'm going to actually say it twice. I wrote in my notes, say this twice. Class or status for men, once this new economic system kind of came to be, was defined by their relationship to the means of production. All right? But for women, our status was defined by our sexual ties to the man who gives us access to material resources. And I'm going to say, like I said, I'm going to say it again. I'm reading it. Class for men, or status for men, was based on their relationship to the means of production. And for women, their status is defined by their sexual ties to a man who gives them access to material resources. So, this was established thousands and thousands of years ago. My teacher, Sarah Jenks, talks about, the rise or the spread of Judeo-Christianism in Europe, which happened 3,000 odd years ago. Sorry, I can't give you the details. And she would argue that that's when it happened. Some people say that when humans switched from, more nomadic communities to more sort of settled communities, that's when sort of patriarchal took root. So there are arguments and debates, and it depends on where you were and who you're talking to. But the point is that once it was established, this is where our status was defined as women, defined by who we were with and the material resources that they gave, the access to material resources through them. So if that is the case, then what are the messages that we receive as women and as men that will help us to be safe in this patriarchal status quo? Which leads us to the second point. Okay, so the first point was, what is patriarchy, and kind of a very quick description of how it came to be, which, major disclaimer, I jumped over a lot. But the second point is this. What are the messages that we have internalized in men and in women through it, in order to survive, in order to be safe in this patriarchal system? Well, for men, the message is, in order for you to be a good man, you have to be a good producer and a good provider, and that defines what success is to you. But in order for you to be a good woman, you have to be a good carer of the man who is providing for you. Of course, all of this is heterosexual, right? Of the man that is providing for you, and of the children that you are procreating for the family that he is in authority of. All right? So that's the messages that we both receive. And I argue, and I see in my private clients and in my group coaching clients, that kind of difference, that kind of, divide in our self-worth and our identity causes so much heartache today. And it's such a muddle in our hearts and in our minds, that manifests in our relationships, especially because now women are being pulled for economic reasons, but also for fulfillment reasons outside the home to become providers and to become producers, for which we either are not feeling rewarded for externally. Hi, Sarah. For which we're not being rewarded, by kind of external society as much as men are or have been. And meanwhile, men partners are not, rewarded for the feminine, caring qualities that they bring into a home. And they haven't necessarily stepped in quite as much as women have stepped out. And so we've got this cognitive load issue, logistical load issue, and this tension around doing too much, right? So, but here's the thing, and here's something that feeds it, and this is really my second point, that even if we live in sort of this modern world where we go to, women go to university and then they come back and they get their diplomas and then they get this fabulous job and it's well paid and the messaging that we tell ourselves, and that sometimes our mothers, our grandmothers, our aunts, our neighbors, our, whoever tell ourselves, is messaging, it's antiquated messaging that is still alive and well in society today. And the messaging is, A good woman is someone who takes good care of her family. And she keeps an orderly home. She makes sure everybody's well fed. She makes sure everybody's healthy. She makes, and then in addition to all of this, we've got modern expectations, which are, modern mother expectations, which are about, in addition to just making sure our kids are well fed and get enough sleep and, are clean, we have to make sure they're going to the best enrichment classes, that they're going to the best schools. We have to make sure that they're wearing their designer clothes and they have the fanciest this and the fanciest that. And so in addition to the internalized messaging of the patriarchy that you are not enough, we've also got these modern layer of expectations, which are much higher than previous generations. And in addition to this, we live in societies, and I would argue that this is actually also in the patriarchy's favor, where the major sort of communal unit is the family nucleus. And because in a capitalist system where you have, what is most valued is your capacity to produce as an agent in society, to produce and to acquire capital, then what becomes most important to you is actually your job. And because male breadwinners are rewarded for being the producers and the providers, often it's their job that determines location. Hello, I live in Brazil, right? So, this is not always the case, but should that be the case, then often we have, because communities aren't valued and have no economic value in capitalist societies, then we move around and it's determined by the job, our production capacity. And therefore, a lot of the time, mothers end up isolated. And so there's more isolation. So we've got the internal messaging that's coming at us from the past, and I would argue that the patriarchy is alive and well. And we've got higher expectations, right? And from modern society, higher expectations around motherhood. And then thirdly, we are living in these isolated family units, which mean that we don't have that communal support that our ancestors possibly had. Having said all this, I think it's important to note that one thing that was highly discouraged by, during this period of the burning of witches and all that jazz, was the gathering of women. It was highly discouraged because it was considered a threat. And so women could be tortured. In some places it was criminalized. And so again, there's I would argue an inherent kind of, it's not a fear that we should gather, but always giving priority to the caregiving role, and secondary or tertiary or fourth or fifth, I don't know how to say that, fourth-shary, fifth-shary, we deprioritize gathering with other women, right? So there's that. That's point number 2. That's a really big point number 2. Point number 3 is really that we are, by internalizing the messaging here, by actually taking this all in and turning it into our living experience, we are blaming ourselves for something that isn't our fault. And by blaming ourselves, we are perpetuating what is the cause, right? So let me explain a little bit. We blame ourselves for not being enough, even though in a system like this, where we don't have support, where we expect that we should be able to do it alone, and society kind of silently also expects the same of us, we keep trying. We keep trying to do more, trying to be more, trying to give more, trying to be better professionals, trying to be better mothers, trying to be better partners, trying to keep the house cleaner, trying to get more focused, trying to be more efficient, trying to be more organized, trying to be more patient, trying to be more. And if we don't, we get down on ourselves. So we're running ourselves ragged physically, and mentally we're shitting on ourselves because we're just not doing enough when we live in this system that isn't supporting us in any way to do enough, right? Or to be enough. because we're so bloody exhausted all the time. And so we're running ourselves ragged, trying to do this. We're never going to get anywhere like this. And this is exactly what keeps the patriarchal machine working. That we are just overwhelmed, overstretched, and exhausted, not even able to have a clear sort of, mind. And so we keep trying and we keep failing, we think we're failing, and we keep blaming ourselves. It's quite a genius, isn't it, on the part of the system. So what can we do about all of this? Well, we need to realize that the guilt that comes up is a message that something is out of alignment. And we are not failing our families or ourselves. The system is failing us. And it needs to change. It's been inherited. It's 1,000 years old, or many thousands of years old. And so what we need to start doing is, and I think it's important for us to say that the messaging that comes from our, aunts and mothers and grandmothers and, maybe even like if you believe in, epigenetics or cellular memory that is probably even deeply ingrained in our cells, all of that was placed there to protect us. It was placed there to protect us so that we believed that this was the way we needed to be so that we could stay safe. Because not being the good, all of those things, meant that we were outcast, or in some cases would mean that we would be physically punished, right? So all of those messages, even though later on they came to be like superficial and, things like, domestic abuse became criminalized, all of that stuff it's very deep inside of us. But what our job is, if we want to shift the system into a system that works for us, is we need to be the change. And that means we need to open our eyes and look at how the patriarchy is manifesting inside our homes and inside our minds. What do we say to ourselves that supports the manifestation of a system that doesn't lift us up, right? That doesn't ensure that the load is shared, that doesn't ensure that our children see women who feel liberated enough to be fulfilled, to live a life that is fulfilling, to find their purpose and to live their purpose, right? So we need to start to open our eyes and see, which is about, kind of waking up at how the patriarchy is manifesting inside your home. Is it about you carrying the cognitive load? Is it about you doing a lot of this stuff? Is it about you, picking up after your partner? Is it, what is it about? So how does it manifest? And you're going to know this by your compass, right? So if you feel guilty, you say, okay, guilt, what's the message here? What's out of alignment? Okay, frustration, what are you telling me? What's out of alignment here? And then when you know what's out of alignment, you can start to sort of tweak it, right? It means that you need to start to be courageous and question all of this with your partner. And you need to talk about it with your kids, too. So, speaking out loud, like, wow, I've just noticed that I find it very annoying that after dinner, everybody goes and to their devices, I'm not projecting, and leaves me in the kitchen to tidy up. Like, what is that about? This used to happen. My husband would not leave me alone in the kitchen. The two of us would be together, but the kids would. And I would be like, hey, we're a team here. We are all going to finish this up together, right? But, it's really important that we start to become aware of assumptions around who does what in the home. And we start to question those assumptions, and we start to have courage to shift the actions that follow those assumptions. So talk to your partners about the patriarchal legacy and how it impacts your relationship with yourself, how it leaves you feeling. How does this video leave you feeling, right? Talk to your kids about it, like open that conversation, and just to be aware of how these patriarchal assumptions are manifesting themselves in your home life. We really need to honor ourselves. We really need to honor our time. A lot of what we do has been invisible for so long in these socioeconomic realities that we live in. We need to make that visible. And we really need to honor our energy too. So I'm just going to do a quick review. Lesson number 1. Truth bomb, we live in a patriarchy. Lesson number 2. I hate to tell you this, but you have internalized patriarchal messages and you repeat patterns that do not support a liberated you, but rather repeat, patriarchal systems, assumptions, behaviors. So, and especially, this is lesson number 3, that your identity and your self-worth is defined by this messaging. So be very aware of when you find yourself, and maybe, it doesn't come out so explicitly, but when you find yourself saying, I'm not a good fill in the blank, mother, partner, housekeeper, friend, daughter, because I don't do this. Be very, very aware of when that happens, because that is likely you assuming what it is to be a good whatever, fill in the blank, right? A good mother, daughter, wife, partner, whatever. And it's going to feel uncomfortable to shift that because the messaging defines our self-worth and our identity. So, those are my lessons for you today. Take them away. I want you to really have not so much a think, but I would like to know what comes up for you in your body when you watch this video. Does it make you feel uncomfortable? Does it piss you off? Does it lift you up? What is your biggest takeaway here? And leave a comment below. I'd love to know, what is your biggest takeaway here about the way you internalize the patriarchy through your internal messaging, through the way you manage your homes, through the way you mother, through the way you partner. And if you are interested in taking a step away from, I was saying how we run ourselves ragged as mothers, trying to do it all, trying to be more, then I would invite you, if you haven't already, Melissa and Sarah, I think you've already done this, but I would invite you to head on over to my quiz, inessencecoaching.com/quiz, and take my quiz to see what is the one area of focus that you can really work on to take ownership of your motherhood experience a little bit more. So what is your biggest struggle? It will help you figure that out, and then it will give you some tools, specifically mantras, and then in the follow-up emails that you'll receive from me, there will be some specific tools and exercises that you can do to support yourself, to deal with that one biggest struggle that you face, and to support you really to overcoming that, and also to learn how to make motherhood your own. You decide what it is to be a good mother, and it has to come from in here, right? We need to create this new system, and a first step in doing that is you figuring out what it means to you to be a good mother and a good partner and a good housekeeper and a good professional and a good you, right? So you can check that out on inessencecoaching.com/quiz. I hope you take advantage of that. It's a super fun quiz. And I hope you got a lot out of this. I really can't wait to see what came up for you, particularly in your body, in your cells, and how it left you feeling. All right. Bye, lovelies.